You just got back from your second expedition to the site using Titan. Tell me about the submersible Oceangate developed, you all developed there.
Well, it all really started with the idea that there had to be some kind of business opportunity in exploring the ocean.
Yesterday afternoon, we were notified by the operator of the submersible vessel that it was overdue, and it had 5 persons on board the submersible.
We worked with a lot of local companies like Boeing and the University of Washington to achieve that goal, to make this business so people can explore the world.
Amazing, and you're making people's dreams come true.
Debris is consistent with a catastrophic implosion of the vessel.
What was billed as a once-in-a-lifetime trip to observe the wreckage of the Titanic turned into a nightmare for those on board the Titan submersible and their families in 2023.
The search is on for a submarine that disappeared while exploring the wreckage of the Titanic. The Everett-based company Oceangate Explorations charters trips to the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean to give people a look at the iconic shipwreck off the coast of Newfoundland. The U.S. Coast Guard has launched a search and rescue mission after the submarine and its crew did not return.
The Titan submersible was reported overdue on the night of Sunday, June 18th. After a surface team lost contact with the vessel about an hour and 45 minutes into the mission. 5 people were on board the submersible when it was reported overdue. Among those on board were a French explorer and renowned Titanic expert, a billionaire adventurer, and 2 members of one of Pakistan's wealthiest families, Shazda Dawood and his son Suleiman. The CEO of Oceangate, the Everett, Washington-based company leading the expedition, was also on board. Rescuers were racing the clock because the submersible had just 96 hours of oxygen on board when it first departed.
After receiving the call, we reached out to the vessel Polar Prince and began a surface search looking for the submersible. At the same time, we launched a C-130 aircraft to conduct an aerial search, both visual and radar, of the scene. The Canadians have had a C-130 aircraft searching as well, in addition to also having a P-8 submarine search aircraft deploy as well, and put sonar buoys in the water in attempt to listen.
The submersible was about 900 miles east of Cape Cod, Massachusetts, in a depth of about 2.5 miles below the ocean's surface. A day later, more ships and vessels were rushed to the area where the submersible was last seen after air and underwater searches failed to yield any sign of the vessel. An ROV, also known as a remotely operated vehicle, was also added to the search.
They have rendezvoused with the vessel Polar Prince and commenced an ROV dive at the last known of the position of the Titan and the approximate position of the Titanic wreck.
It was reported that the sounds of banging were detected by sonar, giving some hope that the people on board the 22-foot-long vessel were still alive. Just after midnight on the East Coast on June 21st, the U.S. Coast Guard posted on X, formerly Twitter, that a Canadian aircraft detected underwater noises, though a search came up with negative results.
The noises have been described as banging noises. Every one of those noises is being analyzed, tracked, looked for patterns, and reported upon.
People who expressed optimism warned of the obstacles in the way, from pinpointing the vessel's location to reaching it with rescue equipment and bringing it to the surface. Furthermore, the area of the North Atlantic where the Titan went missing is prone to fog and storm conditions.
The ship on the surface is trying to locate you, triangulating various signals that it's getting to try and figure out where you are, but it's very, very difficult to do that at the depths that you're at. So the fact that communications are difficult is not a surprise here. The fact that they lost all communications on the way down, that's not a good sign.
There were several ways the submersible could have returned to the surface in case of emergency. If all else failed, the vessel would drop its weight on the outside and begin to rise automatically. The fact that it hadn't was not a good sign.
It is designed to come back up.
The fact that this vehicle has not come back to the surface
does not bode well. Either it's an entanglement issue, or there's a broader set of series of failures that have it now on the bottom.
Washington-based Oceangate Expeditions took paying customers to see the Titanic at a price tag of $250,000 a person. Teams from Oceangate began surveying the deterioration of the iconic ocean liner from 2021 and returned every year since. There were 5 mission legs planned for 2023. The Titanic expeditions aim to document flora and fauna in and around the wreckage and the condition of the wreckage. It was also meant to supplement the work of previous expeditions by obtaining data and images for further study. That's according to the company. In 2021, Stockton Rush himself explained how the expeditions worked.
Like most of the deep diving subs, it's been this very limited group of extremely wealthy individuals who buy and make their own subs and then dive where they want to go. What Oceangate's about is bringing the ability to explore the oceans to everyone.
Not everyone was on board with Oceangate's plan. A former Oceangate employee sued the company in 2018, claiming he was terminated after pointing the potential danger when the Titan reached extreme depths. Prior to the lawsuit, William Cohen of the Marine Technology Society Committee on Submersibles drafted a letter to Stockton Rush. That letter was never sent, but the chair of the committee at the time spoke with Rush over the phone.
As your brothers in arms in this industry, we think this is very risky. This is a dangerous path you're taking.
Cohen said there was no law requiring submersibles to be officially certified, saying that most vessels could go as deep underwater as the Titan were.
There are today 10 submarines in the world that go 4,000 meters or deeper. They're around the world. They're all certified with the exception of the Titan.
Had the Titan gone through the certification process, he believes things might have turned out different.
There's a consensus in the industry that some of this could have been preventable.
It was revealed that the University of Washington's Applied Physics Laboratory provided engineering services to Oceangate and CEO Stockton Rush from 2018 to 2020. In a statement at the time, UW said it was not involved in the design, engineering, or testing of the Titan submersible. However, King 5 would learn UW researchers had more involvement in deep water submersibles than the university shared with the public.
A year ago, in the frantic search,
This is a search and rescue mission, 100%.
for the Titan submersible that imploded, killing 5 people on a deep water dive to a famous shipwreck.
Oceangate Titanic experience.
All eyes turned to the companies and institutions Oceangate CEO Stockton Rush had repeatedly name-dropped in the media.
And we couldn't have done any of this without partners.
To vouch for his experimental Titan that used a first-of-its-kind carbon fiber hull.
This submersible has some elements of MacGyver-y jerry-riggedness.
I don't know if I'd use that description of it. The pressure vessel is not MacGyver at all, because that's where we work with Boeing and NASA and the University of Washington.
Last June, right after the Titan's disappearance, the University of Washington said it had a years-long partnership with Oceangate and the CEO, who died on the sub. But it was quick to distance itself from the tragedy, denying all involvement in the design, engineering, or testing of the Titan. But a King 5 review of more than 700 university records reveals UW's relationship with the now shuttered company that produced the Titan went deeper than the school first shared with the public. Emails between Oceangate and UW staff showed the UW engineers who worked on the contract did offer input and perform work on the early stages of the Titan. In its statements last June, UW said Oceangate had for years rented the school's pressure testing equipment, but no UW researchers were involved in the tests. And separately, another UW school had a 7-year contract with the company, providing engineering services to Oceangate and Rush.
We couldn't have done it without that partnership.
According to UW, the partnership ended with the completion of a less controversial project. This shallow water submersible made of steel that couldn't go anywhere close to the depth of the Titanic. A year after the Titan implosion, UW is still standing by what it told reporters last year, declining any interviews on the subject because of ongoing investigations. So that means these records are really our first and only snapshot of UW's years-long relationship with Oceangate and its CEO. And according to emails, the relationship ranged from cozy to contentious. In this promotional video from 2013, UW and Oceangate made quite a splash about the start of their $5 million agreement.
Born of the partnership between the UW's Applied Physics Laboratory and Oceangate.
Cyclops was developed with the goal of being a totally new approach to manned submersibles.
This is a new venture for us.
That's Dave Dyer, one of the core UW engineers on the project, who, according to emails, became a key player in Oceangate's work and would later provide input on the Titan design.
How do we get Stockton all the expertise he needs?
Oceangate said it used the shallow water vessel UW worked on
There you go, that's pretty good right there.
to test technology and equipment as it developed the deep water Titan. This UW engineer designed the steering system for the shallow water vessel,
PS3.
a lot like Titan's steering system that Rush showed King 5 in 2021. UW emphasized last year that it didn't work on the deep water Titan that imploded because its engineers had only shallow water expertise. But that wasn't how the university pitched the multi-year project to Oceangate. In this 2012 proposal sent to CEO Rush, the school's applied physics laboratory boasted about its experience in deep ocean exploration and research. And years later, in 2016, UW promoted publicly
Critical milestones for Cyclops.
plans to develop a submersible with Oceangate that could dive deeper than the Titanic.
Eventually as deep as 4,000 meters.
In the same UW branded video,
We're testing a 1/3 scale.
the school shows Rush and a group using UW's tank to conduct a pressure test on a model of a vessel called the Cyclops 2. Turns out that was the original name of the vessel Oceangate would later call the Titan. Last year, after watching that old video, emails show a UW professor voiced concerns, calling the school's public statements on the Titan tragedy misleading. In fine print, the school later clarified it had a supporting role in the early development of Cyclops 2, adding a caveat that video editing didn't tell the whole story. Well, the story university emails tell is that by 2017, UW engineers were ready to cut things off. They declined to do any more work on the vessel that would become the Titan because they disagreed with Oceangate on an aspect of the CEO's planned design. Internally, the engineers wrote of their worries that the glass material Rush wanted to use to protect key Titan equipment underwater could explode in the deep ocean. That Oceangate was looking to implement an unproven technique on a human-inhabited vehicle, and CEO Rush might blow a gasket once they shared their concerns. It's unclear if Oceangate moved forward with the design. University emails show, in the years after the disagreement, UW relaxed the relationship with Oceangate, but didn't completely cut ties. In fact, in 2019, about 2 years before the Titan would take its first Titanic dive, the leader of the UW partnership asked the school's applied physics laboratory to bring Stockton Rush onto the team as an affiliate research scientist, saying Rush had added to the visibility of the school. He had ambitious plans to continue developing deep ocean manned submersibles. Emails show the directors signed off, but it's unclear if Rush took on the position. By then, Oceangate had officially renamed the vessel the Titan, and they asked UW engineer Dave Dyer to weigh in on the design. Emails show in 2019 he performed an analysis on mock-ups of the Titan's crossbeams, sharing advice with Oceangate's director of engineering on how using a lightweight metal like titanium would best perform under deep ocean pressures. Dyer did not respond to requests for comment, and it's unclear if the work of UW staff made it into the finished sub. The university says when it parted ways with Oceangate, the school's APL staff completed just $650,000 worth of work instead of the $5 million it had planned. But as the contract came to a close in late 2020, records suggest there was no bad blood. Dyer left the door open, telling Rush there was no effort to sever ties, that the university was still very interested in working with Oceangate as needed. And the next fall, Rush invited Dyer to lunch. He just returned from one of his first dives to the Titanic and was eager to show off pictures and video he shot from the Titan sub that 2 years later would take his life.
The search for the Titan and its crew took a bleak turn on June 22nd, just days after it was reported overdue. Just before noon on the East Coast, the U.S. Coast Guard posted a message that a debris field was discovered within the search area. A few hours later, Oceangate released a statement saying that all 5 people on board were killed. The U.S. Coast Guard confirmed that minutes later.
The debris is consistent with a catastrophic implosion of the vessel.
After days of searching, An ROV located 5 major pieces of the Titan, including a nose cone and a pressure hull.
Essentially, we found 5 different major pieces of debris that told us that it was the remains of the Titan.
That evening, the U.S. Navy said underwater acoustic detection picked up what was likely the sound of the submersible imploding the day it was reported missing. Oceangate announced it would close indefinitely following the news of the implosion. In a statement, the company said, "It's an extremely sad time for our dedicated employees who are exhausted and grieving deeply over this loss." On June 28th, the U.S. Coast Guard reported human remains were likely recovered from the wreckage of the submersible. The news came hours after the announcement that debris from the Titan had arrived in St. John's, Newfoundland. Images from the scene showed twisted chunks of the submersible being unloaded at a Canadian Coast Guard pier. The recovery of the wreckage closed one chapter while opening another, with officials announcing that the recovered debris would be analyzed to reveal clues about what happened to the Titan and those on board. The tragedy in 2023 hasn't deterred others from pushing the boundaries of underwater exploration. Less than a year after the incident, Ohio billionaire Larry Connor contacted Triton Submarines co-founder Patrick Leahy, asking him to build a vessel to be able to reach the seafloor. Connor called the future trip a research mission and to demonstrate to people a voyage like this can be done safely.
There's more world under the water than there is above it.
Patrick Leahy has dedicated his life to the deep ocean.
In my life, I've worked with more than 60 subs.
As the founder and CEO of Florida-based Triton Submarines, he's delivered over 24 submersibles to private yacht owners, researchers, and high-profile filmmakers.
Join me, David Attenborough.
Leahy himself has been on thousands of dives, including to the deepest part of the ocean in a Triton submersible that made history.
You can't replace a human being's presence in the deep sea.
I see the bottom.
It's been a year
Titanic
since
experience.
Oceangate's submersible called the Titan imploded and killed 5 people who were hoping to catch a glimpse of the Titanic. Leahy says the Everett Company's fatal dive impacted his business and killed the dreams of many hoping to someday explore the deep sea.
It frightened people about these brilliant machines, made people scared of them. But by the way, there's a stark difference between that experimental machine that should have never carried human beings and didn't meet any kind of recognized standards, and the beautifully designed and thoughtfully engineered machines that we create.
It's a message shared by others in his field who are now calling for better oversight, saying Oceangate was an outlier that disregarded safety in an industry that had been largely responsible.
Human-occupied vehicles that are certified and accredited have a 50-year track record of perfect safety. 50 years. We need to do a better job of ensuring experimental craft have no place in human-occupied exploration of the deep sea.
The Titan was made with experimental materials, including carbon fiber, that experts say hadn't been pressure tested over time in such extreme depths.
12,500-foot journey.
Oceangate CEO Stockton Rush, who died on the sub, had openly refused to put the Titan through an independent certification process designed for safety.
These programs are over the top in their rules and regulations, but
he claimed the rules stifled innovation.
Turn left, turn right.
In the U.S., it's a Coast Guard requirement that submersibles are certified if they carry passengers. But in the case of Oceangate, industry professionals say Rush found a clever way to skirt the rules.
You can see the mission specialists have their iPhones.
Naming his paying customers mission specialists.
They were mission specialists, they're part of the crew, and they were not considered a passenger, therefore they were not subject to the Coast Guard regulations. It was one of the weasel ways to get around that.
Will Conan is the chair of the industry group for manned underwater vehicles that warned Rush before the tragedy he was on a very risky path. Last fall at a conference, the group reconvened for the first time since the Titan implosion. Conan says representatives from 16 countries were at the table for talks of where the industry should go from here.
We have a lot of rules for submersibles, but there's ambiguity on how these rules are being applied. And it just needs to be more clear, and more importantly, that countries around the world apply them equally.
The Coast Guard announced last week that it's still investigating the Titan implosion. As the industry waits for the findings, Cohen and co-chair Gard Clark, a retired Navy submarine captain, are taking action now.
By going from one country to another, You can kind of weave your way through the rules.
They recently created a new group called the World Submarine Organization to advocate for international changes in policy.
Right now, the focus is looking at what everybody's rules are internationally to unify those rules.
I think that's a very good idea.
For Leahy, the answer isn't more regulations. It's enforcement.
Check, is this a certified vehicle? Is the certification current? You can use experimental robots, experimental autonomous vehicles, because nobody cares about what happens to a robot. But if you put human beings in it, you've got to be held to a higher standard.